There are places that don't just hold sound, they hold memory. And if you stay long enough, the room plays them back, not through speakers, but through the walls. This story isn't about a rivalry, it's about a transfer. A night buried in the booth below, where a voice was stolen. Aaliyah didn't just die, she said no, and Beyoncé said yes. I was there when the reel turned, when the voice changed hands, and the one thing that's haunted me since is the look she gave me when it was done. Not anger, not sorrow, recognition, as if she knew I'd come back to remember the thing no one else will. And once you hear what I heard that night, you'll never listen to her voice the same way again. I hadn't been back in over 20 years. The building looked smaller now, gutted, graffitied, forgotten. The sign out front had been ripped down, the awning rusted into curls, like something had tried to burn its way out from the inside. The lot was empty, just me, a flickering street lamp, and silence. I didn't come here looking for anything. I came because I had nowhere else to go. Studio C used to hum with life. 24-hour sessions, R&B royalty, producers who didn't sleep. But when she died, something inside this place died with her. After that last session, they shut it all down, quietly, no press, no farewell. I was never supposed to come back. And yet, the lock on the side door was broken, almost like it wanted me in. The hallways smelled like mildew and stale cables. The walls were lined with peeling acoustic foam. I passed by Studio A, gutted. Studio B, stripped for parts. But Studio C, still sealed, still waiting. I stood there for a long time, hand resting on the doorknob. My palms were sweating. My heart wouldn't slow down. Not because I was afraid of what was inside, because I already knew what was waiting. I pushed the door open and walked into a room that hadn't aged a day. The boards were powered off, but a red LED still blinked faintly on the console. Dust floated in the air like ash. A chair sat slightly turned toward the booth, like someone had just stepped away. The isolation glass had a smear of makeup on it, lipstick maybe, or blood. I couldn't tell. I reached for the mixing board. The second my fingers touched the fader, my chest clenched. There's a kind of memory that doesn't play in your head, it plays in your bones. The kind that pulses under your skin like an old infection. A sharp breath and suddenly I was back. That night, that chair, that voice, Aaliyah, the last session. She stood in the booth, headphones half on, chewing her lip like she always did when something felt off. But it wasn't the song she was nervous about. It was the room. She kept glancing at the floor beneath her feet, tapping her fingers like she was counting seconds she couldn't hear. I remember her looking at me, her mouth forming words the mic didn't pick up. Don't leave. I didn't understand it at the time. Thought she was just being careful. But now, sitting here, I realized she wasn't scared of something happening to her. She was scared of what might happen if I wasn't there to see it. Back in the present, I looked at the board again. A file was still labeled on the faded tape track. Vox Merge Final Res. That wasn't one of hers. That wasn't a mix I'd ever done. And yet, I knew it was connected to that night, to what came after, to what took her. I leaned back in the chair, heart racing, ears ringing. There was a low hum in the walls, barely audible, a vibration in the bones of the building itself. It reminded me of something she said to me once, a week before the crash. They don't want a performance, they want a permission. At the time, I thought she meant contracts, the usual music industry snakes. But now, in the dark, with that red light pulsing behind the glass, I wasn't so sure. I stood up, unsure if I was ready to remember what came next. Then I saw it. In the corner, almost hidden behind a storage rack, was the old back panel. The one I'd never dared to touch. I used to think it was just an access hatch. Now I knew it led deeper, to the booth below. It started with whispers, not from her at first, from the engineers, the runners, the label assistants who lingered outside Studio C too long without saying why. I'd catch them talking in half sentences. She said no to it. Jay's not happy. Someone else will take it if she won't. I thought it was industry nonsense, power plays, ego trips. But when Aaliyah started looking over her shoulder during sessions, that's when I knew something was wrong. She was never paranoid, never high-strung. She floated through the chaos of this industry like a phantom, untouchable, steady, professional to the bone. But something in her shifted that last month. The sparkle behind her eyes dimmed. Her laugh came out slower. And when she sang, there was something in the back of her voice, like she wasn't alone in there. A week before she left for the Bahamas, we caught a late session. Just the two of us and one producer who eventually fell asleep on the couch. She kept rewinding one of her vocals, listening to it over and over. "I can't explain it," she said. "It sounds like someone else is trying to harmonize with me, but I never recorded a second take." She leaned close to the console, speaking so softly I almost missed it. "I think she's copying me." I asked who. She didn't answer at first. Then with no emotion, "Beyoncé." I laughed. I wish I hadn't. She didn't blink. She shows up everywhere now, doesn't say much, just watches. Her eyes never leave me. I know people say she's sweet, but I feel something when she's near. She shivered, actually shivered. It's like standing next to an empty hallway with music playing down the other end, but the hallway never ends. I didn't know what to say. She sounded tired, fractured, but not crazy. Then she told me about him. Jay. She didn't call him Jay-Z, just Jay. "He brought me to this place," she said. "Said it was special, not a studio, not really, something older. Industry founders only use it when the contract isn't enough." I asked what kind of place. She hesitated. "It's a room beneath the studio, soundproofed from everything. No wires, no computers, just a mic hanging over the center of the floor." She looked down at her hands. It wasn't plugged in, but it hummed. I asked what he wanted her to do. "Sing." That's all she said. Just that. Sing into the mic and everything changes. You get eternal rights, placement forever. They promised I'd never fade. I asked if she did it. She looked me dead in the eye. It didn't feel like a contract. It felt like a trap. That was the first time I ever saw her scared. Not anxious, not worried about her image, scared. She said Jay didn't get mad. He just said, "If you don't want it, there's someone else already rehearsing your harmonies." And then he left her in the room, alone. She said the mic kept humming. The sigils beneath her feet started to glow. She ran. 3 days later, she left for the Rock the Boat video shoot. She didn't want to go. I remember the call. She sounded numb, hollow. "They're rushing me," she said, "telling me I've got to get it done now, that the plane's waiting." She paused. Then quietly, "I think it's because I said no." After the crash, the story came fast. Mechanical failure, overpacked gear, pilot on something. Everything felt too neat, too pre-written. Her funeral was a blur. People we'd never seen before showed up and left without speaking. But what really stuck with me? Beyoncé dropped Work It Out the same week, smiling, confident, perfect timing. And when I saw her live months later, something about her voice made my stomach knot. It was perfect, too perfect, like it had been molded, not grown. Back in the present, I looked around the room. Everything felt still, but not quiet, more like the studio was listening. That's when I noticed it. The faint seam behind the booth glass, barely visible. The hidden door, the way down. The night after she died, I got a message. No name, no subject, just a time and a place. Studio C midnight, no phones. I didn't ask questions. I should have. The parking lot was empty, the building dark. I used the side door, the one the interns used when they were too late for the front desk. Inside, the air was stale, metallic, the kind of stillness you only get when a place has held too much sound for too long and suddenly forgets how to breathe. The other rooms were stripped bare, but Studio C? Unlocked, waiting. There were no lights on, no engineers, no crew, just low music playing through the booth, barely audible. Faint, but familiar. Her voice, Aaliyah's, not the radio cut, not the label-approved version. It was one of her raw stems, one I'd only heard during mixing. I followed the sound. The back panel behind the console, something most people never noticed, was hanging open. I'd never seen it move before. Behind it, a stairwell, narrow, steep, lined with insulation foam, like someone had tried to kill all vibration, all echo. I descended slowly, one hand on the rail. At the bottom was a room I'd never seen on any floor plan. Circular, no windows, no studio equipment. Just a single freestanding microphone suspended from the ceiling. Gold-plated, untouched by dust. Beneath it, a dark ring was painted into the floor. Musical notations scribbled into the concrete like a producer's shorthand turned permanent. And then she walked in. Beyoncé, no team, no fanfare. Just her, wearing a black hoodie, her face bare, unreadable. She didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, she didn't look at me at all. She walked past me without a word and stepped directly into the ring beneath the mic. She took a breath. One, slow, controlled. Then she started to sing. It was one of Aaliyah's unreleased melodies. A simple run we'd looped 100 times trying to get the texture right. But now it was different. Beyoncé's voice hit every note perfectly, technically perfect. But it felt cold, hollow, like a replica that hadn't fully loaded. Then something else happened. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't an echo. But somehow, under her voice, just under, I could hear something else. Familiar phrasing, familiar breath control. Like Aaliyah's voice had been ghost-tracked onto the same melody. Only this time it didn't sound like harmony. It sounded like someone being replaced in real time. Beyoncé didn't stop. If anything, her tone deepened, smoothed. She adjusted her posture mid-line, like she was syncing to something I couldn't see, like someone was in her ear, guiding the cadence. For a split second, the hair on my arms stood up, not from cold, from recognition. It wasn't her voice anymore, not fully. I looked up and saw a figure at the top of the stairs, leaning against the wall, watching. Jay-Z. He didn't speak. He didn't nod. He didn't move. He just stood there, completely still, like this was already happening without him, like this was part of something long prepared. I turned back to Beyoncé. Her eyes were closed now, her breathing deeper, her final notes slower, richer. And when she finished, she smiled, not a performance smile, something more like relief. She looked up at the mic, then turned toward me. Our eyes met. She tilted her head slightly and said a name. Not mine, not hers. Aaliyah's name for me. I hadn't heard it in years. No one else had ever used it. Ever. My chest tightened. Beyoncé didn't wait for a response. She stepped out of the circle, walked up the stairs, and disappeared behind the same panel I came through. Jay-Z followed her. No words. Just a final glance, half acknowledgement, half warning. I stood there alone for a long time, in that room, beneath that mic, listening to nothing, but somehow still hearing something. Back in the present, I realized I had drifted toward the old stairwell again, like my body remembered what my mind had tried to forget. The panel behind the booth, still open. Same red insulation inside. And in the silence, I swore I could still hear that almost voice playing somewhere below. Not quite Aaliyah, not quite Beyoncé, but just enough of both to make me question everything. People always said Beyoncé could sing, and they weren't wrong. She had range, precision, power. But sitting there that night, watching her in that hidden room beneath the studio, I finally understood what had always been missing. She didn't have what Aaliyah had. Not just talent, essence, soul. The thing you feel but can't explain, the ache that lingers after the music fades. Aaliyah had it without trying. Beyoncé wanted it. And that night, she took it. She stood under a gold mic suspended in the center of a round, windowless room. No speakers, no monitors, just that single mic and a black painted ring on the floor marked with faded music notations. She didn't warm up, didn't speak. She just closed her eyes and started to sing. It was one of Aaliyah's melodies, one that never made it to radio, one I knew intimately because I had helped record it. And yet, Beyoncé sang it perfectly, not just technically, emotionally. Same exact phrasing, same minor hesitation at the start, same soft exhale at the end of each line. But here's what chilled me. That take had never left the booth, and Beyoncé had never been in the room to hear it. At first, I thought it was muscle memory, industry mimicry. But something shifted halfway through. Her voice changed, not dramatically, just enough that I leaned forward. There was weight behind it now, texture, that same haunted softness Aaliyah carried even in upbeat songs. I looked around the room, suddenly aware of how still everything was. Jay-Z stood in the shadows near the stairs, watching, silent. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't moved. He looked like a man waiting for something to finish uploading. As Beyoncé sang, her face stayed calm, but her hands started to tremble, just slightly. She held one against her stomach, grounding herself. Her voice wavered for half a breath, then came back richer, deeper. The room held its breath with her. And in that moment, I heard something else. Not an echo, not feedback, another layer. Underneath her lead vocal, I heard it. Aaliyah's tone, barely perceptible, like an imprint under fresh paint. Same inflections, same breath patterns. But the pitch was fused, as if Beyoncé was no longer just singing. She was channeling. Jay-Z spoke once, barely louder than a whisper, but I felt it more than heard it. She didn't want it. You do. That was all he said. Beyoncé didn't stop singing. Her body stilled. Her voice carried the final note. And when she opened her eyes, something was different. The same person, but not the same presence. She turned toward the booth. Our eyes met through the glass. And then she said it, the nickname Aaliyah used to call me, a name no one else knew. She smiled, then turned and walked back up the stairs. Jay-Z followed, wordless. And me? I sat there, alone again, in that silent, padded room. The mic hung still, like nothing had happened. But I knew what I'd seen, what I'd heard, what I'd felt. Back in the present, I stood at the top of the stairwell again, outside the sealed panel behind the booth. My hand hovered over the frame. I hadn't touched it in years. And even though I told myself I came to remember, some part of me knew that once I opened this door, I wouldn't come back the same. The door opened easier than I expected. No resistance, no creak, just silence, like it had been waiting for me. I stepped into the booth, the same one Aaliyah used during her last sessions. The air was dense, musty with old sweat and dust. The foam on the walls was crumbling. One of the overhead bulbs flickered weakly and then dimmed out. I turned toward the far corner. That's when I saw it. A reel-to-reel machine, old, rusted, covered in grime. It shouldn't have been there. Nobody used analog anymore, not even in 2001. We'd moved on to digital long before then. But this machine was set up, wired, and loaded with a reel. A blank reel. No label, no markings, just slowly turning, as if it had never stopped. I reached toward it, and the second my fingers brushed the cold metal casing, something hit me, hard. Not a sound, not a vision, a memory. A late-night conversation in a parked black SUV, Jay-Z in the driver's seat, Aaliyah in the back. I was outside the car waiting. He leaned toward her and said something I couldn't fully hear, but I caught the tone. Cold, calculated. If you don't want it, we've got the next one lined up. I thought he was talking about a track, a placement. Now I know he was talking about her, about Beyoncé. The memory kept pouring in, fast and uninvited. His visits to the studio ramping up in those final months. Not to collaborate, but to observe, always standing in corners, never taking notes, always watching her. And the things he said to me, capture everything, raw takes only. Don't delete any stems. Keep the board live even after she stops. At the time, I thought he was being meticulous, controlling, but now I saw it. He wasn't preserving a project. He was preparing a transfer. I staggered back from the reel. My mouth was dry. My ears were ringing. Everything in this booth, every microphone, every channel, every patch cord, suddenly felt like it had been part of something ritualistic, a container for someone else's voice, a vessel. And I had helped set it up. I turned toward the door, but my hand froze on the knob. For a second, I couldn't remember why I'd come in. I looked back at the reel machine, still turning, still blank. But in the soft scratch of its rotation, I swore I heard something, a soft hum, a breath, a voice. And it was calling me by name. I turned the knob, nothing. It didn't budge. I tried again, twisting harder, still locked. My stomach sank. The booth door had never locked from the inside. It wasn't built like that. Not for artists, not for engineers, not for anyone. But now it was sealed, like something didn't want me to leave. I pounded on the glass. No echo, no response, just silence. And the faint hum of the old reel turning behind me. I spun around, ready to tear the machine apart, but it wasn't empty anymore. Jay-Z was standing behind it. Not in flesh, in memory, but clearer than he'd ever been. No smile, no warmth, just watching me through the scratched plexi of the booth, holding the reel in his hand like it belonged to him. Sing, he said, flat, cold, final. Then again, louder. Sing. His voice warped on the second repetition, slightly deeper, distorted. By the third, sing. It didn't sound like him anymore. It sounded like something older wearing his voice. The lights flickered above me. The mic above my head crackled on, though I hadn't touched a single switch. I pressed myself against the door, heart racing. I'm not doing this, I muttered. This isn't real. But the booth started filling with sound, layered voices, low and rising. Aaliyah, Beyoncé, others I didn't recognize, all looping over one another, all whispering one word, sing. Jay-Z stared through the glass, unmoving, as if waiting for me to break. The reel spun faster in his hands, faster. The machine started to whine. The voices turned into a drone, like 1,000 half-remembered songs mashed together into something that felt like a threat. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, eyes shut. I'm not part of this, I whispered. I didn't say yes. The air went still, dead still, and then silence. When I opened my eyes, the booth was empty again. No reel, no figure, no locked door, just dust and the soft red glow of the standby light on the board. I stumbled out, breathing hard. My limbs felt like they were moving underwater. The hallway was shorter than I remembered. The stairs didn't creak the same. And by the time I made it back to the main console, I couldn't remember exactly what I'd seen in the booth. Only fragments, a reel, a voice, a command, and something watching me that wore a familiar face. I stood there, hands braced on the edge of the console, trying to hold on to what little I still knew. But the memory was slipping again, not fading, peeling, like it had been stored in the walls, and I'd only borrowed it for a moment. And now it wanted to go back. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked down, blank screen, no message. Just a faint recording prompt I hadn't touched. A red waveform bouncing gently, as if listening, waiting. I didn't try to fight it anymore, the forgetting. It began the moment I stepped outside the booth, subtle at first, A missing detail here, a skipped step there. I knew I'd been inside. I knew something had happened. But the why, the who, fading like old tape unraveling in the sun. I walked through the hallway like a ghost, retracing his own footsteps. Everything felt familiar, but nothing stuck. The air felt lighter now. The hum was gone. By the time I reached the front door, I couldn't even remember why I'd come. Then I looked down at my hands, still shaking, still dust-covered, still trembling from something real. And it hit me. This place, the studio, wasn't just a location. It was a container. A vault for sound, yes, but also for memory. Everything I touched inside was a recording, not just of music, of moments, of truth, and none of it could survive outside its walls. As I stepped into the sunlight, I felt it leave me. The clarity, the weight of what I'd seen. The booth below, Beyoncé's voice, Jay-Z's hand on the reel, all dissolving like static into wind. But one thought remained, just one. This story will be my last memory of that room. And I know the next time I speak it aloud, it'll already be half gone.